Okay. So I'm Brenda Barber. I am the Deactivated Nuclear Power Plant Program Manager. And we would like to welcome you all to another informational public meeting with respect to the SM-1A decommissioning and dismantlement. Okay, keep going. So our agenda for this evening, obviously introductions and welcome. I do want to give a project overview and bring you up to date with respect to our current status, provide you with a 1-year look ahead for what we plan to accomplish in the next year, briefly refresh you on our waste transportation approach, and then discuss some safety and mitigation efforts, and then we'll take any questions as well. Okay, so again, the purpose of our meeting is to provide you an update with respect to SM1. We did have a very different approach the last time we hosted the public meetings. Unfortunately, we've had some design challenges associated with the weather enclosure that we hope to build over 606 North. So the team has regrouped and we've made some adjustments in order to maximize the summer construction season. And we've had to come up with some solutions for some recently discovered challenges with respect to the encasement material. So current status, for those of you that aren't aware or haven't read the stakeholder updates, we did do a vapor container entry in January and February of this year. This was the first time that we had entered the containment structure since 2011. So the containment structure is actually the large cylinder in the upper picture here. And then in this lower picture, what's important to note is this containment structure has an inner and outer containment vessel. So the inner containment vessel is completely segregated and intact from the outer containment vessel. So we did an entry into the inner containment in order to assess the encasement material, which we had some concerns about with respect to how it had set up and what it would do when we started to disturb it. So as part of that investigation, our safety team did air sampling to monitor the industrial occupational health of our crew. Our radiological team did radiological surveys. We did structural assessments of the interior stairs. There's catwalk and an overhead crane. And then the most important thing that we accomplished was we did take 3 samples of the encasement material in order to fully test that material for future work in the area. So significant findings. The most important thing that we did discover, the AM9 grout, which is the bulk of the encasement material, contains ammonia. Unfortunately, the grout didn't set up as we suspected, so that ammonia does off-gas when we disturb it. So we did detect that through our real-time air monitoring as well as through all of our off-site analysis. And then another component of our investigative effort outside of the containment structure, we finalized all of our hazardous abatement surveys for lead paint, PCBs, asbestos. So we have all that information. So as we move forward, we know exactly what types of quantities to anticipate. So we do have a brief video to show you exactly what we accomplished during the VC entry. It doesn't work.
Hi, I'm Brenda Barber, Program Manager for the Deactivated Nuclear Power Plant Program. We're here today at Fort Greely in Alaska at the SM-1A Deactivated Nuclear Power Plant. The Corps of Engineers, in conjunction with A3D, is entering the vapor containment structure for the first time since 2011.
Today, the decommissioning team for this project has reopened the vapor containment structure in order to do some additional characterization activities. We have opened the SM-1 VC hatch, and the team is diligently working to open the inner hatch that you see behind me. While this work is ongoing, we're monitoring the atmospheric conditions with industrial hygiene monitoring equipment, including 5-gas monitors and Draeger tubes. Once the VC hatch is open, we will use a HEPA unit to filter the air from inside the VC and discharge it to the atmosphere. The HEPA unit discharge will go to the former cold storage area, which is being heated in order to ensure that all of our instrumentation can properly monitor the discharge stream. So as part of our industrial hygiene monitoring, we're using a 5-gas meter to monitor oxygen, carbon monoxide, VOCs, volatile organic compounds, explosive gases or lower explosive limit, and hydrogen sulfide. So in addition to the 5-gas meter, we're also using Draeger tubes to monitor ammonia in the atmosphere. We're doing this because it's a potential byproduct of the AM9 grout that was used as part of the encasement material. We're testing these gases in order to ensure that it's safe to further open the VC and ventilate it so that we can make safe entry into the VC with our personnel. Today, we have performed our first entry into the VC since 2011 here at SM-1A. The team members went in with purified air breathing respirators in order to ensure their occupational safety. They did the entry in order to perform a safety analysis before additional work could occur. Additionally, visiting us this week are our regulator, the Army Reactor Office, and the Army Reactor Council, who is observing these activities to make sure that we're compliant with our possession permit. So today's activities here at SM-1A will be to enlarge the inner VC opening. So we'll look like a half moon when the enlargement is complete, and it'll allow for safe access of our employees and our equipment to go inside the vapor containment structure and do the drilling to assess the AM9 grout and additional safety hazards. Okay. And so that's available on our website too. So if you want to listen to me drone on about that again. Since then, we've been working on all of our engineering plans for the site, which includes not only 606 North, but also a waste storage area that's located approximately 0.7 miles from the site. So in May of this year, both the Corps of Engineers and the A3D team mobilized to the site. We did have some design challenges with respect to the weather enclosure that we plan to build over 606 North. So we are re-engineering that enclosure, and we'll be talking through some of our scheduled recovery plans later. We did install all of our new security fencing. So the 606 North and South are now completely segregated from a security perspective. Baseline radiological surveys have been completed, and all of our environmental sampling has been completed at the waste storage area. We are actively completing construction at the waste storage area. So we've done some tree removal, site grading, and we're actually getting ready to pour the concrete pad for the weather enclosure that will sit at that location. And then we have placed all of our radiological dosimeters throughout the site, both at 606 North as well as at the waste storage area. And we plan to install all of our radiological air monitoring stations this week. So kind of as a summary, we are actively working at the waste storage area through the remainder of this year. We will have all of our environmental and radiological monitoring established by the end of this week. We hope to have our construction trailers, temporary power at building 606 North, and some additional fencing installed by the end of this year. And that'll allow us to completely segregate our power from 606 South, which is owned and operated by Doyen. And then we hope to transition into abatement and demolition of building 607, which we call J5. It's a Quonset hut that's located on the site. And then concurrently, we're going to start the abatement process within building 606 North. So significant PCBs, lead, paint, asbestos, a lot of environmental hazards that we want to remove before we start demolition. So then as we transition into 2005, there is some large machinery located on the second floor of the building. We're looking at options to safely remove that while we actually have the building still up and standing. It'll keep us warm from the winter weather. We do plan to do demolition of portions of 606 North, so primarily the building structure. We don't plan to impact any of the encased areas, but all the normal building structures, and we have a slide with that later. And additionally, there is a wooden false facade over the containment structure. So one of the things that we plan to do is remove that wooden facade, gain access to the steel dome, do some sampling, and potentially consider taking that outer containment dome off, which gives us more clearance under the weather enclosure. And then next year, during the summer, we will be building the weather enclosure at building 606 North. So some of the photos, just so you can see that the site progress at the waste storage area, we did clear some trees that were at that site and in the footprint of our area. We've completed the excavation for the foundation for the weather enclosure that we will be installing out there. And actually, they have the subgrade in place and they're forming up for the concrete pour within the next few weeks. So that is progressing and we are on target to complete that this year. And the other key thing, as I discussed, all of our environmental radiological monitoring will be deployed by this year. The primary reason behind this is, as we will be discussing soon, we are going to be implementing decommissioning much sooner than we had anticipated in order to make use of the summer season. Part of our decommissioning permit requirements are that we have to have a minimum of 30 days of what we call baseline sampling. So we are in the process of getting all of our air samplers set up this month, hopefully by the end of this week, which means the month of August will constitute our 30-day baseline sampling. So there are a total of 29 dosimeters placed throughout the site. So A2D has a set of dosimeters at the site and the Corps of Engineers still has ours. We still have to finish our annual monitoring for the year, but they've started their monitoring. We will have a total of 8 air samplers throughout the site, and those will be installed later this week, both at 606 North. One will actually be in the corridor with Doyen, and then one will end up at the waste storage area as well. Monthly radiological perimeter samples start this month as well, and that's just in-process radiological surveys that we perform. And then there's a small dry catch basin adjacent to the site that we sample quarterly, so we'll get one sample from that to demonstrate baseline. And so this map really just illustrates everything I talked you through. So all the OSLs say OSL. It might be a little hard to read, but we will be posting the presentation for you. So those are posted on the perimeter fence. We have one in our office building at building 609. There's one in building 608. And then there's 2 placed inside of 606 South, one in the Doyen corridor and one in the fabrication shop. And then the air monitors are also placed around the perimeter. We will have a background air monitor at our office building at 609. And then one will go to the waste storage area. And then when we actually start working inside the encasement areas and we get our ventilation up and running, we will actually place another air monitor on that ventilation discharge again so that we have radiological discharge data for that location. So as we move into decommissioning, our first formal decommissioning effort will be demolition of J5. So it's this beautiful little Quonset hut that you see here in the picture. So the first thing that we will do is we will abate the building. There's a small amount of asbestos and PCBs and lead-based paints. There's some light bulbs, ballast that we need to remove. Once all the abatement is complete, we will apply a fixative to the interior walls of the building. There is some radiological contamination on the walls due to the waste processing that was done in the past. Obviously, that's been secured throughout the use. But now that we're demoing it, we want to make sure that that's properly fixed before we start open air demolition. Once that fixative is applied, we will demolish the building. It will probably take less than a week to demolish that building. The waste will be placed into intermodal containers and secured inside the site until we start our shipping campaigns later in this year. All of that waste will be processed offsite as a low-level radioactive waste, and nothing will be kept locally in the state of Alaska. So concurrent to those demolition activities, we will be starting our hazardous materials abatement inside Building 606 North. So significant amount of asbestos in the building. That'll be the primary focus. We will be removing some lead-based paint as necessary, removing PCBs, and then the bulk of the effort, in addition to asbestos, is universal waste, so light bulbs, mercury switches, those types of items that are in the switchgear, the lighting, the ballasts, et cetera. So we anticipate that we're going to start that in November of this year, and we hope to finish that by the first quarter of 2025. Once that effort is complete, as you can see in this photo, there is a significant amount of large equipment on the second floor of Building 606 North. So here you can see the turbine, the reduction gear, and the generator. And in the back of that photo, that green piece of equipment is the old deaerator. We're looking at an option to actually take that apart and use the overhead cranes to potentially lower that to the first floor into intermodal containers while we still have the building intact, and we can take advantage of the warm building. There is another option where we may demolish the building around and then pick those after the building has been demolished. We're just trying to come up with the right solution set. So the steam turbine, the generator, all the switch gear will be removed and taken out. Those bridge cranes will be taken out, and then we'll start to systematically take apart system piping and do what we refer to as soft demo. We anticipate this will take the first few weeks and take us into the beginning of second quarter of 2025. Depending on our approach as to whether or not we pick that large equipment while we're in the winter months, the focus will then shift to removing all the non-encased Building 606 North structure. So everything in the red has encasement material in it. So that constitutes the vapor containment structure, the spent fuel pit, the demon room, and then the hot waste tanks. We don't plan to touch any of that until the weather enclosure is intact, and then we build additional containment and install all of our ventilation. What we do plan to do is try to remove some of the interferences of the main building itself, and we'll systematically demolish Building 606 North, as you see on the lower portion of this photo. And that will make a clear additional room for us to install the weather enclosure and give us more accessibility underneath that weather enclosure. Now, we do plan to leave the foundation and floors because it gives us a more stable working area as we tackle the encased items and move heavy equipment through the area. So we will not be pulling up the slabs or doing any subsurface soil excavations. So another thing that we plan to do once the demolition is underway, as I indicated, the blue hatched area or the blue highlighted area, a portion of that is a wooden facade. So when they built the reactor, there were some concerns about having the dome. So they did build a wooden facade over it. That wooden facade can be taken down. There's no radiological impact. However, there are asbestos and abatement issues that we need to deal with. So we plan to remove that. That will give us access to the steel dome underneath. The drawings do indicate insulation is present, so we want to make sure that we test that insulation prior to developing a path forward for removal if we deem that to be viable. But the primary takeaway, if we do remove the steel dome and we take a portion of the outer containment structure, we want to emphasize that inner containment structure stays intact. We will not be breaching the inner containment structure at all until the weather enclosure is installed. We've put up proper containment and we've developed our approaches and methodologies to removing that encasement material and properly handling any ammonia and off-gassing that may take place. So waste transportation, I know we've briefed this. We just wanted to give an update. We do have our defined routes from SM-1A over to the waste storage area. So we do take a very defined route. We're hopeful that the waste storage area will be completed by October of this year. So until it's ready for us to use, all of our waste that we do generate will be stored in intermodal containers inside our secured fence. Once the waste storage area is ready to put into use, the waste containers will be moved over there. Prior to moving them there, they will be radiologically surveyed. They will be inspected and be made ready for transport so that once they're in the waste storage area, all we need to do is arrange for trucking off-site. Then the route off the installation is actually out onto Robin Road and then out the main gate. And then we'll go down the Richardson Highway with the rest of the traffic leaving Fort Greely. Next slide. Just as a reminder, this is multimodal transportation for us. So we will be trucking from Fort Greely into Fairbanks. From Fairbanks down to Whittier, we'll be on Alaska Railroad. Once we get into Whittier, we will be on barge from Whittier to the Port of Seattle. And then once we get into Seattle, we get back onto rail and we go by rail down to Waste Control Specialist, which is in Andrews County, Texas. So safety measures, again, we just want to emphasize, we have an accident prevention program, which has been a living document for us. So we've added our asbestos controls plan, our hazardous materials controls plan. We've made our emergency response more robust. So as more work activities come online, our safety team makes sure to fully vet those plans and make sure that if we need to make additions to those, we're making those updates and then they're briefing the crews. Our radiation protection plan is also, again, a very living document. It outlines how we're going to handle radiation protection at the site. And it's a complement to our health physics plan, which we maintain as a Corps of Engineers. And so it, again, is a key deliverable to our regulator, which is the Army Reactor Office. And then our environmental radiation monitoring plan is the plan that we discussed briefly earlier with respect to where our dosimeters are placed on the site and where our air monitors are placed on the site. And so since we have dosimeters out as the Corps of Engineers and A3D has their dosimeters out, they've put theirs in yellow PVC piping. Ours is in white PVC piping. We remove ours in January of 2025, and then our program will end and their program will continue. They will issue us quarterly reports, which we turn into an annual report. We issue that to the Army. We also issue that to the garrison. And then the environmental radiological monitoring, we call them dog houses. So they're white little units that'll be placed along the perimeter fence. And our radiation control technicians will check those every day. And then they sample those once a week. And once we have our permanent temporary power, they'll actually have small lights to indicate that they're running. We've had some problems at our other site where they trip the breakers and they turn off and we don't realize it. So we're bringing that lessons learned with us. So that will all be at the site by the end of this week. We will be starting our baseline sampling beginning the 1st of August. So some additional safety measures since we last met with you. Delta Medical Transport, we've finalized agreements, or A3D has finalized agreements with them. They will be on site for the duration of the project, and they will supplement Fort Greely Fire and Emergency Services. So they will have an ambulance and a paramedic and an EMT at the site at all times. and they'll be integrated into our team. So if we have a simple first aid, or if we have a medical emergency that requires transport to Fairbanks, Delta Medical will provide those services for us, unless we're in a mass casualty event, which I hope to avoid. The weather enclosure, again, for the waste storage area, and looking forward for the Building 606 North, its primary purpose is really to allow us to work year-round. So it's going to protect us from those Arctic conditions, and the challenges that we had with design were primarily related to wind and seismic. So we're working with the engineers now to resolve those issues. And then due to the ammonia that we did discover during the VC entry, we're adding another layer of ventilation. So we were originally going to use just HEPA filters. Now we're going to add granulated activated carbon to our ventilation system. So we'll have 2 redundant layers of ventilation, and then we'll have monitoring after that. So that will protect not only our team, but the garrison and the community here on base. And then because of that ammonia and the discovery of what it's doing when we start to disturb it, our teams are going to go in level B. So they will be on supplied air to ensure that they are properly protected. And then the safety team will closely monitor the situation from a ventilation perspective. And if we can downgrade back to level C and use a lower level of protection, we plan to do that. But if not, the teams will stay properly protected in level B for the duration of the work with the encasement material. So any questions, concerns?
Your unencased construction waste, it gets containerized and moved in the same manner?
So yeah, it'll get containerized and it'll be handled as a low-level radioactive waste, and it'll be shipped to lower 48. Now we may look at alternatives for disposal when we get to the lower 48 states. We did get a little more flexibility, but for us to release that from a radiological perspective is very time-consuming, and it requires not only surveys by A3D, but surveys by an independent third party, and then we have to present that to the Army. So we've done cost-benefit analysis at our other sites. It's not very cost-effective to do that. But we have successfully implemented processes where we can do it as construction debris. It's a process, but we will still bring everything to the lower 48 just to make sure that we have a better regulatory framework for that. Any other questions? Okay. Any questions online? I forgot to ask. Okay. So this will be posted online, and they have done their magic, and this will be recorded too, so you can play it back anytime you would like. So thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Good job.